We're gonna start with our process scripting, which is XSS. According to the, let's see our book. So over here we're gonna open two books. One is Web Application Hacker Handbook. So over here we're gonna try to look for the vulnerabilities. You can see over here attacking data storage, access control, session management, authentication part, and there are many more. See. So this book is one of the best book for if we talk about the chapter 12, which is attacking user cross-site scripting. This is all based on XSS. So over here, you can see on the book, the Web Application Hacker Handbook, plus I'm gonna open a new book, which is Web Hacking Hacker 101. So in this book, we're gonna check for cross-site scripting. And in this scenario, I can look in the chapters. Let's do it. Yeah. So we can see the cross-site scripting, which is a JavaScript vulnerability on the web browser. And let me tell you one thing: this is a client-side vulnerability. So over here they have given mention of description over there. Cross-site scripting, or you can say access, involves a website including uninitiated JavaScript code, which is subsequently passes a user who can execute the code via their browser. Okay, we can see this is a browser over here. And harmless examples of this is alert document.domain semicolon. So over here we can see there's an alert function from the JavaScript code. So how does it work in the real life scenarios? Let's try with any of the website. For example, I'm going to take a website called test PHP right now for the example. So let's try to open the development mode. So let's try F12, and through the F12 I can see we have a console over here, and through the console we can see we can examine the development. So in the console you will have some authorities like alert function. So we're going to use an alert function first of all. Let's try with a domain, document.domain now. Document.domain and semicolon. So over here we're going to run a JavaScript payload on their console panel. Let's try to see again alert single quote document.domain single quote bracket and semicolon. Let's try to execute this one. So I can see over here we can execute our JavaScript code on the web browser, but it will reflect on the server side, and it's not persistent, it's non-persistent. So we can see the storage also, but we cannot see that there is a parameter that can be used for execution part. The network. The most important thing when you are doing some when you are simply putting some exploiting part, remember to inspect element. Inspect element to check all the things. Through the inspect element, you can see the source code of the interface, which is HTML. If you can see we can see only the front end, but in the back end there will be something else. And there's a good choice of HTML, a good combination of HTML and JavaScript. You can see in HTML there is a Java also there, which is saying script source, the data which is fetching from. So the major objective, let me tell you one thing, that if you're finding the cross-site scripting or XSS vulnerability, it could be found in any of the environment on the console or the inspect element. But to better way to inspect the cross-site scripting, you have to use the burp suite. First of all, you have to use the burp suite because the parameter of the cross-site scripting can be implemented or the attack phase. So in this scenario, we're going to try to extract the target website. Why? The first thing is to find the parameter value on the server side. So over here on the burp suite, I'm going to use the new scan and I'm going to use the crawl function. Through the crawl function, we're going to use it for identify the number of parameter values on the server side. So let's try this one. And http test.php.vulnhub.com, we can see the DNS name and we're going to try. And over here, we're going to try to extract all the number of requests, or we're going to try to get all the URLs on the server side. Before that, let's examine more. So we have alert document.domain over here. So this will create the JavaScript function alert and create a simple pop-up with the domain name where the access is executed. Now in the previous version of the book, this is a normal thing. In the previous version of the book, you can use the example of determine if the XSS vulnerability exists. But when reporting, think before how the vulnerability could impact the site and explain that. By that, I don't mean to complete that XSS, but explain what could archive the directly impact on their site, the impact of their site. This is the important part. XSS is the major attack and you will find in many parameters in the real life scenarios, but you have to find the exact parameter value where you can place this one. So in this scenario, if you see over here, if we talk about the classes of XSS, there are three classes. For one is the reflected, stored, and self, or we can say DOM-based XSS. So if you see over the reflected XSS, these attacks are not persistent. Persistent means it will not save on the server side. It will only reflect on the client browser. Meanwhile, the access is delivered and executed via single request and response. But in the stored, these accesses are persistent, or you can say saved, and then executed when a page is loaded to unsuspected users. So when the payload is stored on the server side, when we visit on that particular one, we can simply see the pop-up first. Or you can see over here, self-accesses. These attacks are not persistent, and they are usually used a part of tricking a person into running the accesses themselves. But the real life scenario is totally different. You need to find the exact parameter one. For example, you can see in this, they have given some examples, or you can see they have given some OWASP XSS filter evasion cheat sheet. We are not a good programmer, but we know how to use those things. XSS filter evasion cheat sheet. Evasion means we can bypass the query. Because balance the query is the important part which I taught you in the very long time when we are doing SQL injection part. See over here, the basic XSS test without filter evasion. They are simply capital all the script tag. See? XSS locator. You can try this thing. The following is a polygon test XSS. That test will execute multiple contents including HTML scripts. See? This is the greater part. You can use it. You can use all this one. Image XSS using the JavaScript directive. Sometimes they are not allowing script tag, so we can use image RC. But the main objective is it will alert the function XSS. No quotes and no semicolons. See over here. Case insensitive XSS vector. See. HTML entities, grave essence obfuscation, malformed tag. There are lots of XSS that we can use, but in this scenario, we should know a basic knowledge of JavaScript. There are many websites. See, it's still scrolling.
and it will take 1 minute. Let's try some more website before jumping to the attack phase. Security idiots, which I taught you that. This website is basically used for learning basic concepts. If you are learning JavaScript, I will say start with the first one. Then you can see there are many more things. In this scenario, you will learn some parts of basic of the JavaScript for XSS, basics, stealing cookies, different contexts of XSS execution, different types of XSS filter and their bypass, different ways to bypass XSS filter by leaking, accessing CSP bypass, what is CSP, browser-based vulnerabilities causing DOM-based miscellaneous, stealing CSRF token and performing CSRF action using XSS, exploiting self-XSS login, Angular template injection, manual versus automatic scanning. So there are many ways we can try it with the manual way, we can try with the automation way, and that's why they have mentioned all the things one by one, where you can learn cross-site scripting. So over here we can see the reflected, or you can say non-persistent XSS. In this type of XSS, the attacker needs to share a link with the victim and then which cause the malicious JavaScript to be executed. Whenever XSS will create on visiting the specific link with the specific XSS payload, it's not stored or not persistent in the same way. The XSS vector could not be in get missed or post request. Or you can see if we talk about the store or persistent, which is made. So over here, it occurs in place where a malicious user input containing XSS vector is stored or saved. See, causes multiple users to affected. Stored XSS could be in username or comment or section group, name, status, timeline, some uploads, files, names. There could be many more things. Some functionalities input could be shared with other users too, causing multiple users to be affected. DOM XSS, which is the major part attack. And in the DOM XSS, you can see this category of XSS, which could again be both stored and reflected. This happens when XSS could be executed in existing JavaScript on the page itself by untrusted user inputted source. Will we discuss. So there are many ways that you can learn cross-site scripting, but before learning the cross-site scripting, you have to go through the execution part or the basic concept. The basic types of contents where access could be occurred. It could be your HTML context, your attributes, your URL, or your JavaScript.
सर पार्थ सर
Thank you.
सर मुझे सर ये डॉम समझ में नहीं आया
DOM-based XSS है वो आपको बेसिकली आपको खुद के JavaScript में एग्जीक्यूट कर देता है.
सर आवाज नहीं आ रही आपकी अच्छे से
जो DOM XSS है यहाँ पे,
यस सर
अगर आप यहाँ पे देखो, आइदर ये स्टोर हो सकता है या रिफ्लेक्टेड हो सकता है.
ओके सर
बट ये बेसिकली क्या होता है कि अपने खुद के एग्जिस्टिंग एनवायरनमेंट पे अटैक करता है.
सर एक वेबसाइट में डॉम एनवायरनमेंट क्या होता है इंस्पेक्ट एलिमेंट ही होता है ना
इंस्पेक्ट एलिमेंट के अंदर ही होता है सर.
ओके सर
जैसे मैं अगर यहाँ पे दिखाऊं, यहाँ पे जो बोल रहा है कि यहाँ पे एक्सेस कितने टाइप्स के हो सकते हैं. देयर कुड बी HTML context, attribute context, URL context और JavaScript. See, there are 4 types of attacks.
ठीक है सर
अगर आप यहाँ पे देखो HTML context में there would be a parameter. HTML context, this simple context of XSS could be occur. See this one. Document HTML close, title दे दिया यहाँ पे, context, head, body. An attacker can simply put a HTML form, or attacker can place some payloads like this one. Script source attackers.com evil.js. See, script alert 1 script SVG onload alert, body onload alert, iframe onload alert. See, there are many things that we can use it for information gathering part. But in the real life scenario, when you are doing an HTML payload, think about that where you can place in the title. In the title tag, you can place your JavaScript. See this one. In that XAMPP, you can also place the alert function. If you're talking about the attributes contents, it could be double quoted, single quoted, or without any quotation. See. User input, wherever the user input is required, you can simply put there. In this case, when the user input is insert any attributes value of the HTML tag, user print in the context can be used in conjunction with the event handler to execute JavaScript. And there are three ways: double quoted, single quoted, and without quotation. See this one I was talking about. Wherever the input, wherever the client input is required, you can use it for that. For example, see this one. This is a lead time challenge where we can simply see the quotation of the work. Enter your name and see this one. Let's try Partho. Cannot find Partho. I can see, but it's reflect the value. So what I can do, I can simply check on the source value. On this, there is a parameter, submit parameter with the search. What we can do, I can do crawl over here. View page. Check for the crawl. Where is crawl? I can see the crawl is on the center. And they are in the attributes. In the div attributes. And this is an HTML form. So what is the main objective of attacker can perform? An attacker simply plays a normal script and alert function. Let's start document.domain. Let's try with this one. See. Nice try, but you use document.url. See. They have given some mention. Let's try with document.url as per the data. Document.url will execute the URL section of the target. Okay. I guess this one we have to use double quotes, I guess.
So without quotes करना है.
Without quotes. Let's try with the without quotes. Good work. See you on the next level. Let's try crawl over here again. Source code. Find the crawl again. And we can see the crawl is the same value again. But the value is encapsulated. You see over here, this is the input tag. So what we can do, we can try to execute again. Let's try this one. Now what happened? There's a small error. You have to close the tag with the input first, because the value has been encoded. Let's try with this one. See, you have to close the value according to the value encapsulated. Balance the query is the important part. The third challenge, let's try with this one. Crawl. source code. And we can see over here the craw is single quoted with the double quote bracket. So what I can do, I can simply put again this one, but I have to balance the query with the double quote bracket. Why? Because we have to stop the query and we can execute our payload after that. So that's why they have given the attributes over here. It could be a double quoted, or double quoted would be like this. Single quoted or without quote. It's all up to them. So in this scenario, the most important part that we can try is to manipulate the data. Over here, you can use different types of things. Hidden input. There are two ways to bypass this: access key without one-click event, or you can try the different things. Access key on click, when you simply put on that specific button or execute that one. But in the real life scenario, you should know what is the backend process to how the query has been balanced. The query could be balanced in a single code or a double code. It depends. That's why most of the attacker, they put something else there. Let's try Craw again. In the real life scenario, we doesn't know which payload will be executed because of the poor code execution. Let's try Craw again. So over here, you can see we're gonna check the view source again, and this time I can see that the craw has been shifted to script payload. See, it's using a double quote, the semicolon with the script tag. So in this scenario, you should know which payload should be run in which time, because the most important part is to examine the source code where we can execute the payload. That's why in the real life scenarios, if we find some parameter values, single reflected or stored or DOM basis depend on the server side. If we talk about how we do in the real life scenarios, we basically use our burp suite for that. Let's see the target, and we can see our website over here. The major impact, we can see that over here there are some parameter values. As we can see, there are lots of parameter values. But over here you need to find the exact one. So we can see we basically focus on the parameter values. So artist PHP artist is 1, artist is 2, artist is 3, and we can see the response code also. And over here we can see the methods they use. It's a get method or a post method, depend on the server side. So what is the major agenda of this one? To simply check the vulnerabilities on the server side. So I'm going to check only one parameter value, which could be your, let's try with the search parameter. So over here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to send to the repeater. Why I'm going to send to the repeater? Because we have to do some modification on that. And the request tab, we can see raw packets, some raw packets, some parameters, there are headers, there's a hexadecimal values. So over here, we can see something like this. So we have 3 parameter values. If we click over here, URL, body, or we can say URL 2 bodies. In the URL, we can see test, with the value and the search parameter on the go button. So what we're going to do, we're going to try to check if any of the parameters reflect back to server side. So I'm going to use over here A1, A2, and A3. So I simply modified the parameter value according to myself. Why? Because I want to check the response code from the server side. If they execute the 200 request, I can simply check which parameter has been executed. Okay, we can see that it's still crawling, and uh, we have the response code. Yeah, we have 200 over there. So it means that payload which we have modified over here is been executed from the server side with the 200 indication. So let's check with the response code data. So I'm going to put A over there, but there is lots of A. Let's try A1. There's 0, A2. That we find A2 over there. And which parameter did we find? We find on the parameter called page search parameter. Did we find A3? No, there was no A3 matched over there. So in A2, I can see that the payload has been executed, and the payload, the string value that we put is on the search parameter. Let's try with a simple payload if it execute or not. I'm going to try an alert function. With alert function, we're going to use document.url. Now let's try to execute this one. We can see that we have a response code 200. Let's try with the response code. Let's show response in browser. Let's copy this one and let's paste it over here to check the response. And I can see that the parameter value has been executed on the http test.php.vulhub.com search.php test A1. So this one was executing, but in the real life scenario, we simply used a normal payload. But in this case, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this payload on a intruder part. Because why? Because we have a dictionary which contains all the number of lists. So I'm going to go to the positions and I'm going to specify this one. So clear tags, and we know that which parameter we're going to tag. So I'm going to space this one and put add. I put two adds over here. Why? Because there is only one payload that we can executing. We're going to perform our brute force attack on this search parameter. And over here, I'm going to use this sniper attack. Let's go to the payload. And in the payload, I can see payload 1 only executed. Simple runtime, and there are lots of things, but we're going to use the simple one. Load payload, which is we have created. So I'm going to use the XSS payload, which contains all the number of payloads on the server side. And I already show you where we can download this one. So desktop, and we can see there are lots of SVG onload payload, some double quote, bracket, double quote on mouse over alert. There are lots of other things that we can use. See. So let's try this one. Options, we can set the number of threads according to us. And we can start. Then we simply accept we have already a payload. So on the payload, I can see that there are around 6,586 payloads are there. Either we can wait for that, or we can see the response code of it, and it indicating us that is 200, and 200 indicates that the payload has been executed, and you can see the payload. But if I see over here, all the statements are 200 with the maximum number of lengths. So let's try with the maximum unit. So we have one. See, we have entered a payload of SVG, and let's check the response code. It's showing 200 and see what it effective. Through the response code, we can indicate that the payload is executed or not. See. Or what we can do, we can simply right click, show response in browser, copy the URL and save it over here, and we can see the payload has been executed because it's simply entered some image files according to the SVG. See, it's gonna attach some URL on that section. See, www.w3.org 1995. So what's this basically doing? It's basically affecting the server side, and you can see that it started again. 185 request, but we're gonna try with the maximum unit. Onload user sitemap. See, so show response in browser. Copy the URL, and we can check it over here again. Okay, this is not executed, but we can see the plane. There's some the search for is been shifted from here to here. In the real life scenarios, if we are a good programmer or we are a good attacker, we can simply check through the payload script because we don't have that much of time to simply use a parameter. That's why we use intruder in real life scenarios to get the parameter values and see the response, the length of the part. Some are getting timeout because of the request blocked. So in attacker ways, if I say if the payload has been stored on the server side, it would be a major impact. But we can see this is only reflecting on the server side. If the payload can be stored on the server side, it would be a major impact, or the reputation of the company would be slow. There are many different types of things you can try. But the major important thing is to try each and every payload that you use, because it's all about the list that you have used. We don't know which payload will be run in which parameter, so we have to simply check one by one. First step is to identify the reflected, then you can move to the stored. Through the reflected, you can move to the stored, or through the domain environment. Still, it's running. So all the XSS process scripting can be done by with the help of Burp Suite plus with the help of dictionaries. You can try SecList GitHub. SecList is one of the best one for animation part, for payload, usernames, lots of things. Second is a security tested compression. It is a collection of multiple types of lists used during the security assessment. You can try this thing. Checklist. Checklist XSS. See, brute logging, string logging. There are lots of logging parts. And there are multiple. XSS cheat sheet, port swagger. So you can use any of the things, but it will take some time according to the server and the response code. So this was all a part of your XSS process scripting.